Welcome back to Outspoken with Regina. As America prepares to mark 250 years of independence, and we recently commemorated Juneteenth, we are being asked to sit with a deeper question. Freedom for whom? Juneteenth reminded us that freedom in this country has often been delayed, denied, negotiated, and hard fought for. It reminds us there has always been a gap between what the country promises and what Black people actually experience. And that gap matters. I sat down with Creators for Change Council member Conscious Lee for a conversation about Juneteenth, the 250th, freedom, and what history can teach us about the unfinished work of Black liberation. Let's take a listen. Hello, everyone. For today's Creators Corner, I wanted to spend some time on a question that's bigger than a holiday. What does it mean when freedom is declared but not delivered? It's a question that sits at the heart of Juneteenth, the heart of Juneteenth's story, and one that still has relevance today, even though we've already celebrated the holiday. To help us unpack it, I'm joined by educator, content creator, and cultural commentator, Conscious Lee. Conscious Lee, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me.
All right, let's start with history. When people hear Juneteenth, many think it's simply a day that slavery ended, but that's not really the full story, right? How do you explain what Juneteenth actually commemorates, and why does getting this history right matter?
Man, getting this history right matters because of how ethical and moral we view this country's progress. And when we think about 1865, June 19th, General Granger coming down to Texas and being like, hey, y'all free-ish. And when I say free-ish, if you go through the archive and you see exactly what he told to the enslaved people, he told them to return back to their plantation, return back to their post, and you got to get permission from your slave master in order to leave, and maybe you should try to negotiate a fair wage. So you see that when General Granger come down to Galveston, Texas in 1865, he ushers right in the sharecropping, ushers right in the Jim Crow. So now I'm born and raised in Texas, born and raised in Bryan, Texas, grew up celebrating Juneteenth my entire life. Now, how we talk about Juneteenth in the national dialogue, that it comes from a very romanticized, sanitized lens that says that when the white man, when the white Union soldiers showed up to Texas, he said, "Do y'all know y'all free?" And it was good. And it was like, no. And then when you go through even more of the archive and you look at San Antonio, Texas, and Houston, Texas, and all the small towns around Galveston, they were literally making newspapers about how they could hide the news from their slave, you know what I'm saying, from their property, basically, and then throughout the archive, you have different states, that have had their freedom delayed, you know what I'm saying, I had they free state delayed. I end this response by thinking about how Kentucky, Delaware, Missouri, the Emancipation Proclamation in Juneteenth did not apply to them. They were Union states that were, what I want to use, awarded. I say they were awarded for their loyalty. You know what I'm saying? So think about it like, hey, the emancipation. When General Granger came down, that didn't apply to all black folks. You know what I'm saying? And then there are even some other dates after Juneteenth that were freeing black people. So a lot of misnomers as well was that Juneteenth was the last slave that was freed, and it was like, that's not true either. For people listening and watching, I have a master's degree in adult and higher education, and my undergraduate degree is in African American studies.
I want to drill deeper into something you said. You talked about the Emancipation Proclamation, and I don't think people realize there was a 2.5-year delay. So what is that telling us about slavery, power, and the way Black freedom has been handled in this country historically?
Man, I start off answering this question by giving you a little personal story, right? In 2021, when I think it's 2021, in 2021, when Juneteenth became a federal holiday, I was teaching 9th and 10th grade English in Oklahoma. Oklahoma passed the bill that made it illegal to talk about race in the law because they were trying to criminalize or outlaw critical race theory. Now, as somebody that was teaching, I could tell you through the K through 12 curriculum, there was no critical race theory inside of any learning objectives or inside of any curriculum. But they were able to create this legal boogeyman and say the boogeyman under your bed and then say we gotta throw your bed out. So when I was trying to teach Emancipation Proclamation in the midst of Juneteenth becoming a federal holiday, I literally wasn't able to, teach it because it was seen as being critical race theory. Because how do I teach my students that the Emancipation Proclamation was a empty signifier? It was a symbolism. It didn't do nothing. You feel me? And to me, too, it made me think about this. A lot of us in America, we have this very sanitized understanding of democracy. And I think that Juneteenth and Emancipation Proclamation should force all of y'all to really think about what you're talking about. You wanna defend democracy? That's fine. What are you defending? You want to protect democracy? That's fine. What are you protecting? Because when I think about Black history, Black folks being able to sleep, Black folks being able to eat, Black folks being able to teach and learn, we have to bleed for that. Democracy says that these are things that are supposed to be human rights. Black folks ain't never got those rights. The other thing about this right here that you can tell I'm getting passionate, that it annoys me, is that America wants us to believe that their laws always already have some type of supreme state. Your laws, your laws are arbitrary. You get to enforce them and apply them the way you want to, subjectively based off of time and place. Think about it. The freedom was not delayed. You feel what I mean? Think about it. Technically it wasn't delayed. It really was structured. It was designed that way. When Abe Lincoln say, man, anything to keep the Union intact, if I got to free half the slaves and keep half of them on the plantation, if I got to free three and keep, you see what I'm saying? So to me, think about like, what did the Emancipation Proclamation mean if Abe Lincoln only passed it to be a tool for war? What does it mean? Because to me, it's like, hey, listen, he didn't care about Black folks. He didn't care about slavery. He said anything to keep the Union intact. A lot of us engage in this Union romanticization that says that the Union are the good whites and the Confederacy the bad whites. And we play this game and it's like, listen, man, listen. I came from Detroit. In Detroit, it's the last, not only is it the last stop on the, on the Underground Railroad, there was slaves in Detroit. So when we play this North versus South, Union versus Confederacy game, you're not thinking about how white supremacy and anti-blackness is structural to America, including the
Mhm.
Constitution, including the Emancipation Proclamation. So for me, it's just sitting with, hey, when I'm gonna be a teacher and I'm teaching my kids about the law, how do I teach them about the legitimacy of the law when the law has always been illegitimate to them?
Interesting. So what did that look like for you in terms of teaching? Did you change anything about your curriculum or how did you go up against, I guess, quote unquote, school administration when that law came down?
Um, Me and my administration bumped heads, and it's the reason why I'm not in the 19th grade classroom anymore. Because
Okay.
uh, just
Hmm.
just because I don't even want to put them out too much. Just put it like this: there is a level of benevolent ignorance that a lot of older white educators like to do. And they believe because they've been in education for 10 or 15 years, and maybe I was only in education for 3, that their whiteness and their understanding in the classroom understood the Black children better than me, even though I had more degrees than them and I lived the Black experience. So for me, it was always a tension between, hey, you hired me to do a job. The way that you interpret that law gets in the way of how I do my job. Now, peep game, I don't need this job. I came to this job because I want to teach. This job don't corner the market on how I teach and where I can teach. So guess what I can do? I can leave this job and go find me a space and place that allows for me to better push the curriculum that I want to push, or not necessarily curriculum, the learning lessons that I want to teach. You know what I mean? And just even right now, people are celebrating the 250th anniversary of the United States. Black folks only been able to experience the democracy a little bit since 1965. So when you're celebrating 250 years, you're celebrating 250 years of white settler colonialism and white supremacist violence that you want to make it like, hey, for 250 years, America was the best example for democracy and governance. No, it was not. No, it was not. What do we do with this history? The same white folks that were saying they want to keep up the Confederate flags or keep up the Confederate statues to preserve history is now trying to change history.
Yeah. Well, that is one thing I've always appreciated about your work is that you challenge people to really look beyond like a simplified version of history and really, look beyond these sort of narratives that try to make us feel good about freedom when it's actually we've never really experienced it in the way
You know what I
this
mean?
country is intended. So, well, I wanted to talk about Juneteenth, but you also opened the door to the 250th. And so Juneteenth was a holiday. Um, now we have the 250th, and we have to hold that alongside this reality that the same government that has asking us to recognize this is responsible for limiting, delaying, or even denying us throughout history. What are your thoughts about that?
To be honest with you, I'm trying to work myself down and go into teacher mode with this. I think that a lot of
Okay.
our society suffers from having intellectual, you know what, I'm gonna say being anti-intellectual.
Okay.
When we sit with these realities being together, it show you that the way we want to capitulate America and the way America has been in reality is two different Americas, and a lot of people is
Mhm.
having trouble reconciling this. Here. This is going to be an unpopular opinion.
Okay.
When we sensationalize Donald Trump as being the mere pin in the wheel that makes it where the wheel no longer spins, I believe we're being intellectually dishonest. And I believe we are not having a structural analysis for how America has related to black folks. When we want to make it as if the anti-blackness or the undemocratic or the fascism started with Donald Trump, not only are we not keeping it real with ourselves, it's showing you that you don't really even have a good compass or a good bifocal to even see what's going on. So think about it. Now we say that fascism happened because Donald Trump was using the FCC to take out Colbert and to take out Joe Biden was taking out people for saying free Palestine. Listen, I don't care if you don't care about Palestine. Listen, you don't have to give a damn about Palestine. I want to be clear. You do not have to care about Palestine. But you do have to respect that the First Amendment, freedom of speech and freedom of protest and freedom of petition applies to that. So if you felt like it was cool for fascism, that's what fascism. Hey, listen, if you got some college students and you go beat their head in for saying genocide is bad, that's fascism. A lot of folks turned their head to that and said they don't matter. But now you say it matter now. So what does this mean in terms of 250 years and thinking about Trump and Biden and Obama and Clinton? A lot of people are lost in the sauce of what I'm going to call American exceptionalism. And that's what we're suffering from right now. I just came from D.C. My skin was crawling seeing these folks talk about 250 years. And then talking about 250 years in terms of labor and in terms of freedom and in terms of liberty. And I thought like, freedom for who? Liberty for who?
Okay. All right, let's go there on the freedom. So when you think about freedom today, what should be part of that conversation?
I think autonomy. I think autonomy is the biggest part of freedom and independence that I think that is taken out of us. Right now, I would argue that a lot of us that talk about protecting democracy and talk about, you know what I'm saying, defending democracy, we have a unrealistic, you know what I'm saying, understanding of what's going on in terms of the history of democracy. To me, I'm almost as how I say it right here, metaphorically doing work in terms of gendered violence and doing work around domestic violence. When we talk to a person, usually a woman, that is dealing with a domestic abuser, and we say that, hey, sis, ma'am, you got 15 years of this man being an abuser to you. Why do you think on year 16 he don't change? Hey, the democracy been around since 500 BC. We got 2,500 years of abuse. And y'all still trying to convince me democracy could be a better man. Beating on my people since the beginning of time, you now want to convince me he could be a better man. In any other instance, we'll say, sis, that man is an abuser. Hey, listen, if he walk like an abuser and talk like an abuser, he an abuser. We have this very insidious idea that democracy is not the vehicle to get us to freedom or to get us to this. And a lot of people view democracy as the destination and not the vehicle. I want to be now I'm getting academic.
Okay.
I want people to stop viewing democracy as being the intended destination and view democracy as the vehicle and understand that sometimes you got to be able to analyze and think, maybe this vehicle is not going to get me to my destination. Maybe the muffler needs to be done. Maybe I need a whole new vehicle. And I think this is the hard conversation that nobody want to have. But I'm going to beat the brakes off of anybody intellectual that says that democracy is either A, always already been bankrupt, or B, it is taking us as far as it can as a humans, as humanity. And that's just something I feel like, going back to what we're talking about, Juneteenth. Juneteenth, in my opinion, I will argue, calls into question the entire existence of democracy. That's just me, but I debate it though. Anybody want to debate it? Let's set up time. I need two or three speeches. We can make it happen.
All right, Conscious, you are really pushing us to think. What questions should we be asking right now, both politically and culturally, to get to this destination you're talking about?
I would say first analyzing what democracy has brought us and actually analyzing what democracy is. I think that when we talk about women or, immigrants or what the Greeks call foreigners, before I even get to the slaves, democracy was always invented to exclude these subject positions. When we have people that say that democracy will be good for women, it will be good for immigrants. When? In America, when? Okay, now go back to the history of democracy. How can you say something is so romanticized and so perfect when at the root it is based in exclusion? We always talk about the roots of America. We say that America is not having an error or a malfunction. America was intelligently designed this way. We have to really deal with the intelligent design of democracy and what it was intended to do. What I believe is this: they beat innovation and creativity down our throats when they advocate for capitalism. How come the creativity and innovation can't be used to come up with another governance? So we have to be limited to 500 BC when it comes to governmentality. We have all these other things when it comes to advancements, when it comes to being able to, push things forward, except for governments, huh? We got to be stuck to what the Greek told us in 500 BC. To me, that blows my mind as an intellectual, and that blows my mind because I know there were particular, I'm going to use the word epistemologies, there were particular knowledge bases and particular knowledge productions that wasn't included when they were talking about the architects, or the architecture, or the framework of democracy. To me, it sounds much more smarter, much more ethical and moral to have a conversation that includes and even centers those voices that was excluded to come up with something new. In conclusion, this response right here, I know I am disrupting the comfort zone because I am coming at and critiquing something that so many of us have been indoctrinated to view as being the thing that proves American supremacy. I know that. I know that a lot of y'all screaming in y'all seats. I know a lot of y'all thinking this man is crazy. Cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. What I would say, give me a Pepsi challenge. Let's have some intellectual dialogue. Second thing I say is this. Can we separate imperialism from democracy? I would argue no. I would argue that imperialism is a baked-in feature that justifies democracy. That's how the Greeks spread it. That's how America spreads it. That's how the entire Western world spreads it. So when you talk about now being free or freedom or liberation, what does freedom and democracy mean if it has to be justified by imperialism? If imperialism has to actualize it. I would say democracy is going in and invading Venezuela and kidnapping Maduro. That is democracy. Regardless of what y'all, that is democracy. Democracy is giving Native American smallpox blankets and saying that I can do this land better. That is democracy. Democracy is saying, hey, blacks, I passed something 2 years ago that said y'all free-ish. Now go back to the plantation and sharecrop. That's democracy. That's democracy. Y'all wanna carve out the most precious parts, like, yeah, democracy is when Martin Luther King said democracy is failing. That was democracy. And I keep on going with this, Doc, but I hope I've answered your question. But it's really just like, hey, forget about what they taught you about this. Go learn for my motto is research over me search. A lot of y'all stuck on me search when it comes to this concept. You don't do no research.
You answered my question and you pushed us to think, and that is the point of these conversations. What I also appreciate about this conversation is that you're reminding us that any commemoration, any celebration is not really just about looking back. It's about, really asking what freedom means today for Black people. Who has access to it? What still stands in this way? And I want to
Hey,
thank
think
you.
about this. Let me talk about this on real fast.
Okay. Yeah.
1865 is when we talk about the Emancipation Proclamation. The decision of Louisiana versus Calais, that was overturning something from 1965. So when you talk about Emancipation Proclamation of Juneteenth making us free, you have to put that in context with the piece of legislation that came 100 years later. That's now being overturned. Let that marinate on y'all spirit for a minute. I ain't mean to cut you off, Doc.
Thank you for all the voices that you fight for. Thank you for bringing this perspective to Creators Corner. And we're going to go back to Outspoken with Regina. For today's narrative power note, I want to sit with one thing. Freedom is not a story that the powerful get to finish for us. As America prepares to mark 250 years of independence, we are reminded that there's always been a gap between the promises of this country and the lived reality of Black people. The official story says freedom happened when the law changed. But Black communities have always understood that legal recognition and lived freedom are not the same thing. The gap between what is promised and what is experienced is where narrative demand lives. Our research shows that Black women are asking for stories that reflect our full humanity, dignity, care, safety, joy, thriving, and self-determination. Not just survival, not just struggle, and not resilience without repair. That is why reproductive justice matters, because reproductive justice asks a different question. Not simply do rights exist, but can people actually exercise those rights in their daily lives? Can people access healthcare without racism, neglect, or dismissal? Can they make decisions about their bodies without fear, punishment, or government interference? Can families raise children in communities with safe housing, quality schools, living wages, and freedom from violence? A narrow narrative of freedom says the law changed, so the work is done. But a justice-centered narrative asks, what are people still being denied? So as we look ahead to the 250th, the question is not simply whether freedom was declared. The question is whether freedom is being made real, and what stories must we tell? What conditions must we create to close the distance between the two? That's Narrative Power Note. And that is the end of today's episode of Outspoken with Regina. Share this conversation with your community and follow us across all of our socials. Thank you for joining us today, and thank you to Consciously for such a powerful conversation. Until next time, stay grounded, stay present, and most of all, stay outspoken.